Welcome to my channel. So this is my first ever video. Hope you will enjoy it. A little piece of advice, you guys can make up the scenes on your head while hearing the stories to enjoy further. If you want me to add subtitles, please let me know in the comments. Without further ado, let's dive into our first story.
I know it sounds like something straight out of a movie, but it's 100% what happened to me about 24 years ago. When I was still relatively newly married, my then husband and I moved into a townhouse-style apartment. The 2 floors of our apartment were on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the building, and the management office and mailbox area was almost directly below us on the ground level. Important for later. The woman who managed the building was older, didn't care for the property well, and usually spent most days chain-smoking Camel non-filters in her office, and being a hateful old racist. Imagine renting a place from Juno, the social worker from Beetlejuice, but less helpful. She really resented what we had the townhouse, claiming we lied about my being pregnant when we moved it, because she didn't want to rent that unit to people with kids. She also made a few disparaging remarks about my husband, due to his race. She was a real peach, truly. So after kiddo was born, I was a som, just busy keeping the house clean and the baby occupied without a car, or local mom friends. After lunch, the kiddo needed a bath. Anyone who's fed a 9-month-old baby food knows the mess that can happen. So I went upstairs and ran the tub. Soon, I had the baby sitting happily splashing in one of those suction cup bath seats. Important to note, it's the middle of winter and we had no heat, an issue I'd been fighting Juno the landlord about for a while, among other maintenance issues, like my arcing ceiling fan, or the garbage disposal that was held on with duct tape and leaked. We basically had to keep a space heater or 2 in every room to keep the chill off. I had taken one of the space heaters in the bathroom to keep the bathroom warm enough for bath time, and had it sitting out of reach and splashing distance, on top of the bathroom counter. I was standing in the bathtub, getting ready to lift the baby out, when all of a sudden, the space heater started to rock back and forth, when it had not been rocking before. I had this horrible feeling of dread as I looked at the heater, and I just reacted because I knew I couldn't get both of us out of the tub in time. I reached down to grab the baby seat, ending up pulling it up off the tub and dropping the baby over the side of the tub to the bathroom floor just as the heater got to the end of the cord. It thumped into the shower door, bounced off the edge of the tub, and landed on its side on the floor a couple inches away, where it shut off. Had auto shut off in case it got tipped over. When I looked over to the corner of the bathroom, that part of the room seemed to just get darker, like it was filling up with shadows. There was no smoke, no change in lighting, no windows, so no sun going behind a cloud, etc. It was just darker. I also started to smell cigarette smoke. Camel non-filters, which I knew the smell of well from being in Juno's office all the time to get things fixed. The smell was so thick it made me cough and my chest ached. But I couldn't see any smoke haze. And I felt this overwhelming sensation of hatred and malice, like someone was standing there giving me a death glare. I grabbed the baby and a towel and ran downstairs. I was so freaked out, I couldn't bring myself to go back up there. So I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept the baby wrapped in the towel and cuddled up to stay warm. I stayed down there the entire rest of the day until my husband got home. Every so often, I'd look up the stairs at the bathroom, but I didn't want to take the baby up there, and I was afraid to leave him alone downstairs. When he asked me why the baby wasn't dressed, I told him about the heater and the smoke in the bathroom, and he went up to check, figuring it was yet another maintenance issue. There was no electrical issues, no damage to the outlet, no smoke, no cigarette smell. He put the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watched it for a few minutes, and it didn't rock, so it didn't rock itself off the counter earlier. He laughed it off, but later that day, we heard Juno's adult son downstairs near the mailboxes yelling his head off at people. And that's when we found out she'd had a massive heart attack in her office earlier that day, and he'd found her dead in her chair, with a Camel non-filtered still in her hand. Now into the next story. I manage a venue that used to be a Roman Catholic church, and was then abandoned and used as a flophouse for many years. I am frequently in the building alone late at night by myself, closing up after shows and club nights. Several strange things have happened to me there. I was really busy setting up for an event, and I was walking along the mezzanine area toward a room that everyone had told me was haunted, and while I love ghost stories, I don't really believe in the supernatural on a fundamental level. The last thing on my mind at this time was spooky stuff. I was en route from one area to another, on a mission to do some logistical task or another. I paused at the railing, and suddenly I felt the sensation of being grabbed hard around the ankle, as though from below, which made no sense as it was a 25-foot drop down to the main floor. I leapt backwards and started shaking my leg, and looked everywhere, but saw nothing. I was taking a meeting in broad daylight with a collaborator. We were sitting on a plush couch in the middle of the space, enjoying our conversation about a potential series of events we could do. Because it was a business meeting, I left one cushion of space between him and myself on the couch. Suddenly, mid-sentence, I felt the distinct sensation of someone walking up to us, and then sitting directly between us. We both paused and just stared at the cushion, which was moving. There was an impression as though someone had sat down, and there was a palpable energy and tension in the air. It felt for all the world as though an invisible person was sitting right there. We sat frozen in silence for about 30 seconds, which is actually a long time, in the middle of a business meeting, staring at the cushion, until I finally waved my arms through the space in exasperation and laughed. We were both confused and shaken and ended the meeting quickly. I had to supervise a group who was rehearsing in the space. I was hungover and got in the morning, led in the group, and went upstairs into a secluded area to take a nap on the couch and wait out my shift. Mid-nap, I woke up suddenly and heard someone slowly descending the stairs from the bell tower. I froze and kept my eyes closed, thinking it was someone from the rehearsing group, and I just wanted them to go away. The footsteps drew closer, and I heard what sounded like a man muttering to himself under his breath, as he leaned over me and grasped my hip hard. He squeezed it until it hurt. I let out a yell and opened my eyes, but there was nobody there. Probs just sleep paralysis, but very odd. I've never had a sleep paralysis incident before. Multiple instances of seeing figures in the mirror, hearing doors slam, etc. People calling my name from distance corners, when I'm there by myself. The custodian once told me she refuses to clean at night anymore since she heard someone quietly praying in the confessional at 3 in the morning. Everyone likes to claim it's the ghosts of all these Irish Catholic priests and their parishioners, but in my opinion, the many years the church sat empty and desolate as a last resort shelter for drug addicts and prostitutes is the more likely window of time where people would have died desperate, lost, and in pain. Now into the next story. I've had a few supernatural experiences, but the one I usually go to is when I worked in a supermarket. I grew up in a farm town, and the only place to get groceries besides the grossly overpriced Shopko on the edge of town was the family-owned supermarket, Robertson's. The Robertson family was very active in the community, but also had a reputation from miserly to straight-up evil, depending on who you asked. If you asked me and the rest of the bag boys, Robertson's had a dark aura around it. Many features contributed, like the vaulted ceilings in the back rooms, the creaking floors in the upstairs offices, and the door hidden behind a pile of old shelves that seemed to lead under the loading dock. The worst was the patriarch of the Robertsons, Blaine. He was too old to handle the business decisions, but he was too stubborn to let his toupee-toting son take it out of his hands, so he spent his days shuffling around the floor, antagonizing the bag boys at every turn. He'd chastise us for clocking in more than 1 minute early. He'd chastise us for standing at the clock with a minute left in our shift. He'd chastise us for our laziness the second we weren't actively moving items. I always joked that Blaine was a vampire. He just refuses to die. Why else is there never a call over the intercom for kids who lost their parents? One night, my suspicions were reinforced. Blaine had showed up about 9 to take care of some office work upstairs. With all of our closing duties done, my partner for the night and I lollygagged in the stockroom, right at the foot of the office stairs. When 10 rolled around and it was time to close, I figured I'd let Blaine know we were locking up. I started up the stairs and suddenly noticed it was dark. I got to the top and looked around. Not a single light in the offices was on. We had stood at the bottom of the stairs the whole time and Blaine hadn't passed us. Even when Blaine isn't looming like Nosferatu, strange things happen upstairs. The exposed water pipes leading upstairs twang like someone hit them with a hammer. Footsteps on the creaky floor echo through the whole back room. All of this happens when the offices are pitch black, as we stand next to the stairs. One night, my partner and I got freaked out by the noises from the offices and decided to spend the remainder of the shift lapping the store. But as we walked perpendicular to the aisles, a can of green beans halfway down the vegetable aisle suddenly fell off the shelf. We put it back in place and started walking again. 2 aisles down, another can fell off. This time, as I put it back in place, a can 15 feet down the aisle flew off the shelf. We left that one sitting and huddled around the cash registers for the rest of the shift. To top it off, though, a bag boy requested to be taken off night shifts after an experience he had in the break room. The break room has 2 small bathrooms, male and female. He was taking his dinner break when he heard a baby crying from the women's bathroom. He had been in there 5 minutes already and hadn't seen anyone come in, much less with a baby. He endured the crying for 5 more minutes before he got concerned and knocked on the door. Repeated knocks and questions got nothing back except for the non-stop bawling. He was finally convinced something had happened to the mother and cracked the door open. The room was dark and empty. Now into the next story. Oh, this is going to be a long one. I've never publicly shared this, just told a few friends about it over the years. But this is one that my boyfriend and I don't really talk about much because it's absolutely unbelievable, even for us still. So here goes, I guess. To anyone that reads this and doesn't believe it, please don't feel the need to tell me. I lived it and still have a hard time believing that it even happened. I went to a concert with some friends one night. I believe it was early, sometime around January 2016. We all had a really good time, nothing out of the ordinary. Once we came back, one of the people we'd gone with started passing out crystals and stones and stuff to look at. This dude brought out this amethyst crystal that was over like 300 years old, and it was passed down in his family for generations. Really awesome stuff. I don't know what the hell happened next, but one of the girls grabbed the amethyst crystal to look at it, and as soon as it met her fingers, her entire facial expression changed. Her eyes were like black, super dilated, wild. She started sneering at all of us and talking like backwards. 2 people had to leave because they couldn't stop throwing up, almost instantaneously after her demeanor changed. She stood up and started saying weird stuff. We almost thought it was a possession case, but she seemed very aware the entire time. She started talking about how someone in the group was cheating on her with another girl who was there, in the room with us. The whole thing got super awkward and honestly terrifying. Things were moving around the house, doors were slamming by themselves. She seemed to be the person who was making it happen, but it seemed paranormal. A few of us eventually moved to another room to talk about some stuff. As we were all trying to figure out what to do, one of our friends, the one I'd mentioned earlier who was apparently cheating on her, said that they thought the girl was crazy. And just as he said this, a huge chunk of ice/icicles fell from the top of our roof, directly onto the top of his windshield, shattering it. Once things died down for the night, we were all about to try to sleep. Come to find out we're supposed to share a room with this girl. Nope. We sat awake, upstairs on the 2nd floor. She was on the 1st floor, and heard a ton of weird noises from her downstairs. Metal scraping, fingers tapping on the table, hysterical crying, and then immediate laughing. And then something completely different. We thought everything was over. Maybe she had fallen asleep. My boyfriend pulls up his Facebook account to check and see if any of our friends had posted anything about the crazy night. The first post on his newsfeed was a post from her, from 5 minutes earlier. It read, "Congratulations, you've awoken the dragon." While reading those words, we literally hear what sounds like a fucking big-ass reptile, like a croc or something walking up the stairs. Like there are heavy, padded, rough footsteps stepping step by step, slowly up the stairs. I cannot explain this to this day, and I have chills writing this. This girl played some damn Jedi mind tricks on us, I swear. The thing that creeped us out even more about the dragon thing was that she literally carried around a little stuffed lizard toy that she named Jerry Garcia, after the singer. Go figure. We muddled up the courage to peer over the side of the staircase as the thing was just about to hit the top 2 steps. And there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. We felt completely insane. We stayed in that spot and did not move for the rest of the night. Eventually, the downstairs noises ended as well, and everything was silent. We crept downstairs after we felt that we were safe to do so. Whether it was a paranormal experience, some black/voodoo magic, or just dealing with someone completely off their rocker, we didn't know. All we knew was that we were terrified and did not feel safe that night. When we finally got back downstairs and looked at everything, it was weird. The girl was gone, all of the cabinets were open, all of the doors, including the basement and the outside front door, were open, which could have been terrible because we had 3 indoor cats at the time. We also found a bunch of weird memorabilia and relics in the basement a while after this happened. I left some bits and pieces out because I'd literally be writing this for hours if I told the entire story from beginning to end. These are just the main highlights, and the things I can remember super vividly, as if it just happened a few days ago. This event was over the course of an entire night, not just a few hours, and there was so much that happened. It was also about 6 years ago now, so the timeline leading up to all the scary shit is a little bit hazy these days. Thanks to whoever decided to read this whole thing. Sorry if it's hard to follow. I don't really like reliving the event because it honestly brings back some really unsettling feelings. If anyone has ever been through anything similar or has heard of any people like this girl, please tell me. Now into the next story.
It's one I very rarely tell in person because people invariably don't believe me. When I was 20, I visited a town in Italy that has a medieval tower that you can climb. My girlfriend didn't want to, so I went up on my own and was the only person at the time doing so. It was a hot sunny day when I entered the tower. There was a flight of stairs that wound around the edge of the tower and no windows. Climbing the tower took at the very most 5 minutes. At the top of the stairs there was a ladder and a trapdoor that opened up onto the roof of the tower. When I opened it, I found the weather had changed dramatically and was overcast and threatening. I forget if there was thunder or not, but I was genuinely concerned about lightning, being at the top of a tall tower in that weather. I cautiously climbed out onto the roof just to have a quick look before going straight down. The roof was surrounded with a sort of metal cage of bars that were presumably intended to prevent anyone falling/jumping off the tower. I heard some thunder and saw electricity arc between some of the bars, not a blinding lightning strike, just arcing. I decided that the tower was imminently going to be struck and descended as quickly as I could. At the bottom I was surprised to find the weather was again sunny with a clear sky. My girlfriend could tell I was shaken, and was amazed when I told her I thought that maybe there had been lightning. The weather hadn't changed at all whilst I'd been up the tower and had remained sunny and clear. I'm very much a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I'm not religious, and I've had no other weird experiences like this. In short, I'm not your stereotypical, spooky things happen to me, kind of person. And yet I've no explanation for this. I've tried since to figure out which tower it was. I spent a couple of summers traveling around southern Europe and climbed a lot of old towers, and I'm fairly sure it was the Torre Grossa in San Gimignano. It doesn't have a cage around the top, but there is a metal cage around the bells, and that must be what I remember.
Now into the next story.
I remember on this Thursday I had just gotten home from school at around 3:15 and I went straight to my room. So I was 11 then, and the family I was raised in, we are very independent and we taught ourselves to look after each and one another and don't open that door unless it's family. Anyways, I came home that day and I went straight to bed because I was tired AF, and I remember that was the same day my brother would be getting home from his rugby trip at around 9 p.m. He was 16 and my mum was 36 at that time and she was at work and won't be getting home till after 10 p.m. So what my story is. I woke up that Thursday evening with the house so fartin' dark that it was like a dark gray/blue color, with a man standing at the edge of my bed. Just standing there staring at me, breathing so heavy as if he was like one of those idiots trying to creep you out at the end of the street. Well, this was him. I swear it felt like hours, as if it was a tunnel vision while listening to him breathe so heavy in and out. I tried not to acknowledge him standing there, but what gave me goosebumps even more was hearing a woman's voice whisper in my right ear as if I felt the heat touch my skin, say, "Look." Bruh, I turned my head like it was an instinct, like WTF was wrong with me. I turned my head so fast to see where that voice had came from. I instantly regretted that shit because the last thing I remember, I looked back at that man and it was like a sudden snap. He started charging towards me and seeing his mouth open and this horrible screaming sound come out, his hands aiming for my neck. Bro, I was screaming, screaming so loud that my dog broke his chain and ripped the back door into shreds, growling and barking, trying to get to me, seeing my bedroom door slam with this loud bang being heard. I don't even know how long I was in this room for until feeling these cold hands wrap around my mouth, pinned on the bed as if I thought I was going to die. Thank fuck to having my brother knocking down that door with our uncle and my dog being by their side. Believe it or not, our family come from a long line of great chiefs and leaders, and with the language my uncle spoke. I am 21 years of age now and I have not been possessed or have seen a bad ghost ever since.
Now into the next story.
When I first moved out of my parents' house, I lived in an old but recently renovated annex building on a farm. I was the first person to live in this building. It was really old and looked like it could have been an old pig shed. The farm was also really old and there were remnants of an old priory about 50 m from the farmhouse and annex, which also had an old, excavated graveyard. One of the skeletons is in our local town museum as it's the tallest man to ever live in my local area. Weird stuff happened pretty much from the day I moved in. Orbs in photos, unexplained thumps and bangs, all the usual ghost stuff. The annex was really small, tiny shower room / toilet, then a tiny kitchen, then a living room and then a bedroom. Each room had its own door. One day I was in the shower, and when I got out and went through to the kitchen, all the cupboards were open. Twice I had opened a kitchen cupboard and had a glass and a mug fly out, as in literally fly out and hit the wall behind me. If I ever fell asleep on the sofa in the living room, I would be woken up by a man's voice angrily shouting, "Hello," at me. My TV would turn on in the night, my phone would randomly start playing music for no reason. I had my best friend stay over one day after we had been out drinking. We were both hungover and she went to bed in my bedroom while I was zonked out on the sofa. She shouting at me, "FFS, stop walking around, why can't you sit down?" And I was sitting down. I couldn't hear the footsteps but she definitely could. I would also lose things in my bedroom all the time. Jewelry, makeup, etc. A new lady started at my workplace and little did I know she's a bit psychic. I had never spoken to her about where I live or that weird stuff happened in my house all the time. One day, totally out of the blue, she told me there's a woman who likes to come to my house and play and she really likes the teddy on my bedside table. Honest to God, there is no way she could have known this. She went on to say the woman is from a long time ago and has learning difficulties and the monks used to look after her. At this point my mind was totally and utterly blown. She told me to buy her a teddy and put it next to my one only bedside table. I was skeptical, but willing to give anything a go because I hated living there so much. I was so scared and freaked out so often. So I did. And everything stopped.
Now into the next story.
I remember on this Thursday I had just gotten home from school at around 3:15 and I went straight to my room. So I was 11 then, and the family I was raised in, we are very independent and we taught ourselves to look after each and one another and don't open that door unless it's family. Anyways, I came home that day and I went straight to bed because I was tired AF, and I remember that was the same day my brother would be getting home from his rugby trip at around 9 p.m. He was 16 and my mum was 36 at that time and she was at work and won't be getting home till after 10 p.m. So what my story is. I woke up that Thursday evening with the house so fartin' dark that it was like a dark gray/blue color, with a man standing at the edge of my bed. Just standing there staring at me, breathing so heavy as if he was like one of those idiots trying to creep you out at the end of the street. Well, this was him. I swear it felt like hours, as if it was a tunnel vision while listening to him breathe so heavy in and out. I tried not to acknowledge him standing there, but what gave me goosebumps even more was hearing a woman's voice whisper in my right ear as if I felt the heat touch my skin, say, "Look. Bruh." I turned my head like it was an instinct, like WTF was wrong with me. I turned my head so fast to see where that voice had came from. I instantly regretted that shit because the last thing I remember, I looked back at that man and it was like a sudden snap. He started charging towards me and seeing his mouth open and this horrible screaming sound come out, his hands aiming for my neck. Bro, I was screaming screaming so loud that my dog broke his chain and ripped the back door into shreds, growling and barking, trying to get to me, seeing my bedroom door slam with this loud bang being heard. I don't even know how long I was in this room for until feeling these cold hands wrap around my mouth, pinned on the bed as if I thought I was going to die. Thank fuck to having my brother knocking down that door with our uncle and my dog being by their side. Believe it or not, our family come from a long line of great chiefs and leaders, and with the language my uncle spoke. I am 21 years of age now, and I have not been possessed or have seen a bad ghost ever since.
Now into the next story.
This story is from my brother. We are both from the pretty far northwest Highlands of Scotland, and we were both living there one winter working the same job, salmon farming if you're curious. It gets really dark, really cold and really stormy in the winter, and we are from a very small village next to the sea, with maybe 50 houses spread out along a few miles. Just darkness, heather moors, sea and mountains on either side outside the little row of streetlights. I was living with my mum in her little stone house, which was cozy enough and nothing untoward happened, but my brother was renting a massive house about half a mile up the road. It was about 6 bedrooms, I think, very old and tucked away in some trees at a bend in the road. Most of the rooms were unused and full of old junk, which was spooky enough. My brother just used his living room, bedroom, and we had converted a downstairs room into a gym that we used together. Apparently he was sitting watching TV one night alone, on a fairly still night. His living room had a direct door to the outside which was seized shut, and the door handle started to rattle. Not the whole door shaking with the wind or whatever, just the door handle, as if someone outside was ragging on the door trying to open it. Even more unsettling is that there were big windows on the house, and you could effectively see the outside of this door. Obviously nobody was there. After a while it stopped, but I think he had a very restless night. He is not really into this kind of thing, so I'm inclined to believe him. He seemed rattled the next day. What's more, I may have imagined it, but when I was working out in our rudimentary gym alone, I had a key. I could swear I heard footsteps, or the sound of someone pushing a heavy thing across the floor upstairs. Most likely just the wind, but it did creep me out a little, even in broad daylight. And on top of that, the closest building to his house is actually a 19th century ruin. There are a lot of these there, just on the other side of the trees. It is set back from the road and upslope, so on a dark night the streetlights don't catch it and it silhouettes quite spookily. This photo of it is from a walk last week actually, when I was visiting my mum. Me and my brother live in cities now. So anyway, everyone I know agrees that this ruin is different from the others in the village somehow. There really are loads of them, left over from the Highland clearances, a particularly dark time in the Scottish Highlands. I always feel the need to speed up when I walk past it, and my wife said the same thing last week when we went for a stroll. When I was living there and had to walk my mum's dog, he used to get his hackles up and growl in its direction most nights. All the other ruins feel just quite benign and empty, you don't really notice them, and they are pretty close to the modern road, so are well lit by the street lamps. Most probably, a deer or something like to frequent it, which annoyed the old dog, and the way it looks is quite stark and does set the imagination going. But I can't help thinking that there is some kind of mournful, vengeful presence there that terrorizes anyone living nearby on a cold Highland winter night.
Now into the next story.
We bought a brick house back in 2012 and fixed up the inside, and the roofing was replaced. Well, nothing happened for a while in the home, but little things started happening, like the oven knob cutting itself off, funny because it never did it till then. To very strange basement sounds. One night while hanging out in the living room around 11:30 with my mother watching TV, one of her poodles she had out named Cupid, for no reason started growling into the kitchen and nothing was in there. Then he started growling at the hallway doorway, then the door leading to the room in front of the hallway entrance. I picked him up to show him nothing was there. I walked him to the hallway, he flipped out, managed to jump from my arms and ran back onto the couch with my mother. We was visibly confused, but what just took place? Many other things happened too. One time my mother and one of my younger brothers was hanging out in the kitchen, one night while they was playing Sims 3 or 4 on her laptop. And they said they heard what sounded like the dog kennel scraping the floor across the sunroom, and when they looked nothing had been moved. One time I was laying in bed at like 1 a.m. I'd say in the morning. Laying there minding my own business, but was completely scared half to death when some super loud bangs went off, what sounds like gunshots outside my window or in my room. I wasn't the only one who heard it either, my sister in the next room did. We was shaken up by it. I threw my covers over my head in fear before I dared to get up. Well, it just so happened that these very same really loud bangs happened again a few times. The second only I heard it, I think. The third time it woke everyone up, and my father actually scanned all in the house and outside around it with his pistol 'cause he thought someone was just shot. Keep in mind, whatever this was, it sounded like a gunshots that was loud. He found nothing. With everyone in confusion and shaken up, I don't remember sleeping that night. One night my sister was in the kitchen and she found the chair in the middle of the room in the kitchen, so she thought the boys got up and moved it, so she moved it back to the kitchen. Well, as she left the kitchen into the hallway, the chair has started moving back across the kitchen and she didn't care to run back into the kitchen. This happened a few more times with that chair sometimes being knocked over. We'd hear sounds like footsteps coming up the basement with no one there. It always felt like you was being watched with no eyes. Our attic we didn't know we had, you would hear sounds from it, but we passed it off as maybe rats or something. One time my oldest brother was over, we was hanging out and we all heard knocking coming from the ceiling light taps above. The basement lights would cut themselves off at random when they was on. One night I was laying in bed around maybe 11 o'clock, I heard heavy boots come up to my bed and then leave. I first thought one of my brothers put on my boots, but they was in the living room and my boots was in my room next to the closet, I believe, or sunroom. After a minute I got up and asked who came into my room to check if I was asleep. They all looked confused and said no one has been. I was then met with a chilly feeling over me. My sister's dog Molly would growl at her room closest many of times and it would freak my sister out. One time me and my brothers was playing Terraria on the Xbox 360, minding our own business, having some fun, and our sister came up from her room and asked who knocked on her frame beside the door. We told her was have been in here in my room, which was pretty much confirmed by itself. That knocked happened a few times again. Wanna hear some crazy parts? Well, one of the beds that was in the place had light blood stains on one of the bed sheets along with additional info the neighbor told us about the place. She told us the man who owned the place had shot himself in the basement. They said it took him 3 or 4 shots to the head to actually kill him because they missed vital spots in the head. The last shot did the trick. We was never told the old man, who was a drunk and half-crazy man, killed himself in the basement. And the bangs we heard made more sense after hearing that. Though the old man's suicide was years after we bought the place.
Now into the next story.
A friend of mine, who we'll call Jess, studied in a Catholic school in high school and had many paranormal encounters, but what spooked her out the most was this. It was night and almost everyone had left, but she and her classmates were practicing for some event until late at night in their school. She went to the restroom to pee and after that, she washed her hands. The restroom had 3 stalls inside and no door, so you could see whoever passes by outside. She was busy washing her hands when it noticeably became cold, like colder than it's ever been in the building. She was beginning to get scared, but shrugged it off as a sudden breeze. That's when a nun appeared on the doorway, wearing bloody clothes and clutching a rosary in both hands. It was walking towards her. Jess screamed, then began citing the words to the Hail Mary. It didn't do anything because halfway through the prayer, the nun opened its mouth and recited the prayer with Jess. At that point, she knew she couldn't do anything to save herself. If the demonic nun was praying with her instead of backing away, she knew she was fucked up, so she did the most reasonable thing at the moment. She passed out, and was woken up by a classmate 30 minutes later.
If you have more stories like this, consider sending me through email. You will get my email details in the description. Thanks for watching.